All right, it looks like we've got the critical mass of the folks that I think we're planning on joining today. So welcome to all of you. I'm glad you all could be here. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and I'll share the results back out so you all can see. So it looks like a lot of people are familiar with turning on and off video and screen sharing, which is great. Some familiarity with reactions and chat. A little less with breakout rooms and polling, so that's why we're diving into all those topics here today. We are recording today's session. We will make at least one of the session recordings available on demand for folks who might want a refresher or who weren't able to join one of the original sessions we're running. So welcome to using CarmenZoom for enterprise project trainers. My name is Megan Roddy. I am the project learning manager and happy and excited to be here with you. I know many of you have already gone through some of the previous Train the Trainer training we have, and so I do want to give a special thanks to a couple folks we have in our audience as attendees today, both Paul and MJ, who those of you who attended the in-person version, you may recognize them as folks who helped lead those sessions. But now that we're pivoting to a more virtual world, we're here and ready to share what we have with you. Emma, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Emma Young. I'm part of the OD Carmen support team. One of the tools we support is Zoom. So I was asked to join as from the sort of technical side of things. I'm happy to help Megan with this important project.
We're happy Emma is here. So any of the kind of technical back-end things, she certainly knows and has lots of lessons learned, both from personal experience as well as running these sessions together. I think I know Emma run into lots of fun encounters. So a quick agenda today, we'll do a Zoom overview. We'll do an overview of screen sharing, chat, reactions, polling. We'll spend most of the time today talking about polls and breakout rooms, and then we'll get a little bit into next steps for what you can expect from the project. A friendly heads up that Emma is furiously in the background trying to take attendance. So before you all hop off at the end of the call, she may have a couple questions to make sure that we've accurately captured everyone who's here today. So before we jump in, I wanted to go really quick and talk about the different roles that people will have in the Zoom meeting. So you may have talked in your course groups, and if you haven't already, you should be soon, about the difference between the trainer role and the facilitator role. So the trainer is really the one who's going to be learning the content about Workday, helping understand the activities and troubleshooting some of the questions. So they'll be the ones who's leading the session content and sharing their screen. They'll primarily be going between PowerPoint and the web. And you'll need to have the web open when you do your demos in Workday and our training environment. So because of that, they'll have what we call the co-host role in Zoom. And that really drives some of the breakout room dynamics that Emma will talk a little bit later. We also have the facilitator role. So the facilitators are a really key role, and I know Paul and MJ are here because I know they'll both be supporting as facilitators. They really act as the MC, help monitor and respond to chat and questions. They'll be doing some of the back-end kind of tactical Zoom pieces, right? So opening and closing the polls and the breakout rooms. They'll also be creating a parking lot. So when we talked about, in person, how it's great to have a parking lot. You can kind of walk up and jot down the questions. A little harder to do when you're on your computer. And so some of the parking lot, a lot of the parking lot will be coming from what's in the chat. So since they'll be responding to that, they'll also be a help to create that parking lot question for you. If the session's going to be recorded, they'll be the ones who hit that record button. But it'll just be something that you'll want to talk to the project team about if your session needs to be recorded or not. And last but not least, they'll be taking attendance. And I see you have a question about should we use Chrome or IE. I will get to that when we get to the screen sharing part, Trevor, but that's a really good question. Okay. So that's just a quick overview of the two different groups that we have on the call today. Just wanted to make sure you knew and had the right thing in mind before we talked about Zoom. So I'm going to do some of the Zoom basics on the front end, and Emma's playing her MC role in the background, which is why she's taking attendance. Then we'll flip towards the latter half, and I'll act as the MC when Emma walks us through some more details around polling and breakout rooms. So for a Zoom overview, first, foremost, if you haven't already, you'll need to go in and activate your CarmenZoom account. And you'll do that by logging in at carmenzoom.osu.edu. That's important to do because then you'll have access to the professional level account that the free account won't have. And you'll also then be able to appropriately access all the content that we're managing on the front end for you. So all you'll have to do is log in and then launch the meeting, as opposed to trying to set everything up. So if you haven't already, and you don't need to do it this exact second, but that'll be one of your action items coming out of today's meeting, is activating your CarmenZoom account. A couple quick things about using video. So we're encouraging learners to use video. And so as trainers and facilitators, I'm going to encourage you to lead by example and turn your video on. Not a requirement. I know some people can be insecure about what they have in their background, especially if you're working from home. You may or may not have a dedicated home office, and if you do, it may or may not have piles of laundry behind you or animals running. And so if you're concerned about that, we do have branded virtual backgrounds available. The link there takes you to some of the Ohio State ones. We also do have some project ones. I've got one here trying to figure which way I moved. So you can see go.osu.edu/workday in the lower corner. The video is just a good way to gauge engagement, interest, and create connection. It's a little harder to do today because the session is so large. Lucky for you, most of the training sessions are going to be between 15 and 25 people, so a much smaller group than what we've got here today. That said, don't mandate video. Not everyone may be able to. Not everyone's laptop has built-in cameras. You know, there may be some settings on their computers, depending on the role that they have at the university, that don't allow them to turn it on even if they have it. I think the other piece, especially as we work from home, we all are using home internet and not business internet. And so sometimes we get yelled at, you have an unstable connection. If that's the case, I'd encourage you as trainers and facilitators to turn off your video so you can make sure you just don't get disconnected from the meeting. And the way you share a video, if you guys haven't already done it, in the lower section of your screen, there's a little button that says Start Video. If you want to select a virtual background so people don't see behind you, you can just click Choose Virtual Background and upload any photo. In terms of managing your room, I think it's just worth calling out, you're going to have some hiccups, right? So there's going to be some bumps across the road, just like there would have been in the classroom. And so there's some things that you'll just want to think about in advance to make sure you have a smooth session. So ask yourself, where do you want to lead the session from, right? Where is maybe a quieter place in your home or a place where you have the best internet? I purposely kind of switched home offices with my husband when I'm leading this because he is closest to the router and I'm furthest from it. I think another thing to call out when possible is to use a headset or headphones instead of just your built-in computer microphone. It gives better audio quality and it picks up less background noise. So if you do have a kid who is done with their virtual homework for the day, wants to announce that to the world, people don't hear that as loudly. Or a dog who sees a squirrel or the mailman, you just don't hear that as much in headphones or headset versus the built-in computer microphone and audio. Do what you can to minimize interruptions. They may happen, right? We're all getting used to working remote and getting used to this, what I'll call new normal or new not so normal. But where you can, try to minimize the interruptions. If you're going to be recording, just a quick trick that Emma has taught me and that I now use, I like to use just a Post-it note that says, hey, you need to record the session, and I stick it on my computer so I don't forget. So, little tips and tricks just to help you remember in case there are some things that are happening. If you're not sure if you should be recording your session, just talk to the change team and they'll let you know specific to the sessions you're running if you should expect to record them or not. All right, so that's kind of the quick and dirty overview of the Zoom basics. and how to use it. Let's talk about screen sharing quickly. There's a lot of folks who have experience in screen sharing, so I'm going to go over this pretty quick. The things you'll primarily be screen sharing will be the PowerPoint, because all of our courses have some kind of an accompanying PowerPoint, more than likely a website with a training environment in it, and potentially some documents. So if someone says, what activity are we on? And I can't find where we are, you may find it helpful just to pull up, hey, here's the activity guide. Here's the one we're on. We're on activity 2.3. It's on page 10. Here's what it looks like, in case people get lost. Those are the three primary things you'll be screen sharing. You know, in the moment, if other things need to be shared, you can, but we're not planning to stream any videos or anything like that. So that's primarily it. To do screen sharing, towards the bottom of the screen, there's a little green button that says share screen, and it gives you the option of what you want to share. So you can share your whole desktop, or you can share a specific application. It's up to you, whatever is going to make sense and work best for you. Some tips for screen sharing, and this is just kind of a lesson learned based on personal experience. I often prefer sharing the application versus my whole screen. So if I think I closed Skype and set Skype to do not disturb, but I didn't, I don't get those pings in the last minute. But if you want to share your whole screen, some things you'll want to do is just turn off email notifications. I'd actually encourage you to think about what applications you need open and just closing them all together. So for example, I've closed everything in my Chrome. I've closed all of Chrome. I've closed all my documents. I've closed Outlook. I've closed Skype. I've closed Teams. So all I have open right now is PowerPoint and Zoom. And that just makes sure that people don't get the little potential private or confidential little reminders in the lower corner as your email pops up. If you don't want to do that or can't, just make sure you set yourself as do not disturb on Skype or Teams. You may want to close Skype altogether. I had a colleague who got a phone call through Skype, and that phone call along with Zoom at the same time caused them to lose connectivity. So like I said, whatever is going to work for you, just think about it and be conscious of it. If something comes up, you can pause your screen sharing. So it'll say whatever people are currently seeing, they'll keep seeing while you try to pull something else up in the background. That's not a requirement, but I want you to be aware that it's some functionality that exists. And last but not least, just think about what you're sharing. If you are using Chrome, you may want to hide your bookmarks so people don't see, you know, if you have your Facebook as a favorite at the top, people don't see that, or they don't potentially see your personal Google image up in the upper right corner if you're logged into Chrome. So just things to think about and make sure that you're presenting yourself in the best possible light in the most professional way. All right, so that is screen sharing in a nutshell. Doing it is fairly easy. It's just a matter of learning those tips and tricks to make it go smoother. So let's talk about chat. So we are primarily using chat to replace what would have been in-person conversation. So the facilitator is going to primarily monitor the responses, particularly as questions come in ongoing, and so that way you as the trainer can really focus on the content. You don't have to feel like you have to constantly go back and forth between things. Something important to remember with chat, when you're in person, and I think MJ or Paul may have taught this, the rule of silence, how you don't want to just ask a question, wait 5 seconds and move on. You give some time for people to respond. In person, that's usually around 30 to 45 seconds, maybe a minute. In chat, you'll want to give at least 90 seconds for people to respond, because instead of just thinking and talking, you have to think and then type it all out. And so you don't want to lose that opportunity for engagement in case they have a really great idea or something really great to share, but you just start rushing through the content because I'll be honest, facilitating virtually is really awkward sometimes, and it can feel like you're talking to a really quiet, empty room, and you're not, but people are just muted because it's a different dynamic. I'd encourage you to read responses back as they're sent in. That way, people can see that you're paying attention and they hear you. You know, encouraging those who have been quiet to respond. If you have an attendance list and you have a smaller session, it might be easy to kind of put a little check mark when you've seen people send in questions or ideas. That way you can say, you know, hey, I've noticed, Allison, you've been a little quiet so far, and I'd love to hear your perspective if you have one. So you're not mandating, but you're encouraging. Something, kind of a tip and trick for facilitators, especially if you have smaller sessions, a lot of times people don't realize that they're muted, and so you'll start seeing their mouth talking as if they're trying to communicate something, but they're not because they're muted. So, you know, if you've got a smaller session, you may want to just check, especially if you're asking a question, just check the video to make sure people don't think they're talking when you can't hear them. When you do chat, there is an opportunity to send it either private to an individual person or public. If someone's emailing or pinging, I should say, and say that they're having trouble seeing the screen, that might be more like a private chat, but if it's a public, might be those more broader conversations. And, you know, just be aware, depending on how you're joining and how other people are joining, that your mic could be muted in more than one place. So I always have it call my phone, and that means that I need to be unmuted. And of course my phone is teal, so it's not showing this, but it means that I need to be unmuted on both Zoom and on my phone. So just something to be aware of and check. So that's chat in a nutshell. I'll run through some of the questions. So share best practices for taking attendance. So you will have access to the rosters of people who've registered for your session. So you'll have that list. Whether it's easier for you to have that document open and just kind of run through and look at the participants, or whether you want to print it out, kind of physically check it, whatever's easier for you or you have access to. Not everybody has printers at home. I just got one for Christmas, actually. I didn't before then. So it depends, but yes, you will have attendance list from Buckeye Learn in advance. We are closing course registration 7 days before a session starts. So that way we will be able to appropriately plan for the size, for the people, for the dynamics. So really good questions, Paul. Okay, so we're going to jump in and talk about reactions. And what I would like you guys to do is if you go to the, depending if you have this in full screen, it may look a little different for you, but go to the bottom corner and open the thing that says participants. And once you open your participants panel, you'll notice a little icon that says raise hand. So I'm going to ask all of you to raise your hand right now, just so we can get used to using that. Yeah, it looks like we've got a lot of folks who've raised their hand. I'm just kind of running through. About 8 or so folks who haven't raised your hand. If you don't see how to do it, let me know, or message Emma or put something in the chat so we can make sure we're helping you troubleshoot it. You can go ahead and put your hands down, but as you look at that participants panel, you'll notice that there are quite a few options for reactions. We're really going to use reactions as a way to engage people without having to have a more robust, more robust formal way or a formal conversation, just a quick gut check and just get immediate reactions to content. You can have people raise their hand. You can have people click yes or no. So if you have that participants panel open still, you might see the green check mark or the red X mark for no. People can give thumbs up, they can clap. Some of this is going to be planned in the way your course has been designed, but you may also find other things that work for you. So for example, you may decide, in order for me to determine, when people are done with activities, I want to have them click that green check button. That's generally what we're recommending, but as you get more comfortable with it, make sure you're able to take the content and make it your own and really make it engaging for people, because you're ultimately, you guys are, most of our trainers are going to be end users. So you guys are going to be doing this work too. And so what their questions are going to be and what's interesting and the parts that may be a little bit drier. So find ways that work for you and that work for you and your facilitator. This is kind of, if you click the participants panel, this is what you'll see. So the version on the left is what you see as a host. You'll notice as a host, you don't have the raise hand button. So it doesn't mean that it's not there, but as a host, you just can't raise your hand. The one on the right is the participant view where you do see that. The other piece I'll call out in the host view is there's a little clear all erase button. So if you wanted to say, raise your hand if you've ever done this before, do a quick little rundown and see, okay, looks like about half of you have, and you don't need anything else, you can click clear all, so that way it's ready for the next time you're planning on using it. And it'll take everyone's hands down or remove their reactions. So those are reactions. Looks like we've got we need a resource with some good workday jokes. I feel like we've got a lot of trainers and some of you are pretty punny. So if anybody's got some good wordplay on work tags or workday, feel free to toss those in the chat. Certainly open it to any and all ideas on this one. So that's sort of a quick rundown and overview of the basics of Zoom, of how to share screen, chat, video, and reactions. From here, I'm going to hand it over to Emma, and she's going to talk us through a little bit more of the technical, tactical pieces that take a little bit more administration, like polls and breakout rooms. Emma, are you there? Can you hear me?
I'm here. Thanks, Megan. So polls, basically we did, when you entered the room, there was obviously that poll, which is a nice way to start the meeting. You've obviously seen what it's like to have the attendee view of the poll, but now we're going to be thinking about what it looks like from the host side of things. So a technical note is only hosts can actually create polls or edit them. Co-hosts can launch them as long as they have been set up by the host in the meeting. And I know that Megan will be, the technical side of that is going to be handled, I believe, when you're working with your training people. But what we want to think about is why you want to use polls. So if you can move to the next slide, Megan, thanks. So as we were talking about earlier, it's a good idea to have someone who's going to open the polls. It's generally going to be the facilitator, but as long as someone knows it's their responsibility to open the polls, that's the main thing. It's a great idea to set them up in advance. In theory, you can do a poll on the fly, but that's going to break up the flow of the session. It's generally not going to be a good idea. So what kind of things might you want to use polls for? Well, getting opinions. What do you think of this? Should we cover this? Is everyone familiar with this topic? Knowledge text, it's similar. Are you comfortable moving on from this topic? Do we still need to look at this topic? That kind of thing. Data on how to adjust the session. So at the beginning, the poll we use basically to gauge where people are at, what they're familiar with. If it turns out that you find that a lot of people are struggling with the same thing or have not covered the same topic, then obviously you can use the majority of the session to cover that. It can be good to just use polls as a breaking point in content, especially if it's a longer presentation. That allows you to have a poll and then maybe a break where people can go and do something else and then keep the Zoom meeting open and come back to it, or just basically a way to break of information or tasks. They're also really good for just encouraging interaction, especially when you're working with a larger audience. And generally those folks are going to be muted, videos may be off. Sometimes it feels like you're just talking into an empty room, like Megan said. So polls are a good way to just keep that interaction going. Just a way of checking in, making sure people are still engaged, because when they're dealing with information that may be new to them. It's a good way of making sure they're still engaged as they're going throughout that material.
And the call out I'll give here is that in many of the courses that you all are engaged in, we have that planned in as part of how we've structured the course. So if there is a poll planned for your course, you do not need to be the one to create it. We'll actually be creating the Zoom meetings for you centrally, so that way you don't have to worry about all of the administration for each individual session. But as you look through your content, if you think, you know, I'd really like to get a pulse check here, this section seems really long, you know, how might we break it up? I'd encourage you guys to just have those conversations with the project team, so that way, you know, we can balance the desire to customize it and make it your own and really own that content, with the need to create a fairly similar experience with very similar takeaways. So if you have ideas, certainly encourage you guys to share them with the project team. But for the most part, a lot of these have been thought about and planned in advance. So you'll just want to ask as you start going through the content, you know, are we using polls, and what are they, and what am I supposed to do with them, and what's the goal of them? Is it truly just to break it up because I've been talking for a while? Am I supposed to, you know, look at the reactions and adjust the content, and if so, how? And just have that conversation with the project team as you review your content.
Thanks, Megan. And as you can see in this image, when you're logged into a meeting and you're either the host or co-host, you're going to see a polling icon, and that's where you would basically access what polls are attached to that meeting and launch them. And then at that point, once they're launched, as you saw earlier, the host can choose to share the results with the audience, which is really another great way to see, okay, people are struggling, but we're all struggling, or we all have questions about this. It just helps people to feel they're not alone in this, that learning new things can be tough. And you can also choose to relaunch the poll. So say you started with a poll about someone's confidence level in the material, you can compare the poll at the end with how they feel after going through the session, things like that. Megan and myself will be sharing a poll at the end to gather feedback about the session. If you can move on to the next slide. Okay. So polls, relatively straightforward and a lot of fun. I recommend that you start using them even in your regular meetings. It can be a nice way to break up content. But imagine like you're leading a session or you're working with a larger group. We have, including myself and Megan in this group, there are 56 people. So breakout rooms are a way that Zoom lets you divide up people so that they can work in smaller spaces. For example, in the main session where we are now, if everyone had their camera on, that could be overwhelming people, and it might not feel like they want to talk. But with breakout rooms, you can break up that larger group into smaller groups. So what we're going to do, and we're doing it manually, so it might take a hot minute, but we're going to, I think, Megan, we should use more than 2 groups since we have so many folk. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, yeah, let's do 3 today, maybe.
Okay. So we're going to break it into 3 rooms for about 5 minutes or so. And then when you're in that room, we'd like to encourage you, if you can, to turn on your video, to see who else is in that breakout room with you, and basically talk about what your takeaways, what your concerns about using Zoom to facilitate training. At the halfway point, that's the problem with 3 rooms. There's only 2 of us.
All good.
So math is hard.
No worries. We'll do 3 rooms, but only, we'll join 2 of them, and then maybe you'll pop up in a couple of them. But I know we've got a couple of skilled facilitators on this call as well. So
right.
We're going to encourage you guys to come off mute and really have that conversation and talk about, what have your takeaways been, and how have you used Zoom, and what have your lessons learned been, and what are some of your concerns. And if it's quiet, I'm going to ask some of my skilled facilitators that are out there, and I know you're there, to just help encourage that conversation.
Perfect.
And but today I think it may make more sense to do it automatically just because of the volume of people we've got here.
Right. Good call. If you can move on to the next slide. Thanks. So you are going to be invited to join a breakout room. If you click on join, it should take you into a room. If you click on later for some reason, you should still see a breakout room icon in the meeting panel that you can actually choose to join the breakout room. It may, because of the numbers, it may just move you into the rooms automatically, but you should know what room you're basically going into. So I'm just going to set that up. I'm just going to choose 3 rooms, and that'll be about 18 to 19 people per room. I'm just going to create rooms, and you can't see this because I'm the host from my side. So looks like Megan is going to be in breakout room 2. And so see if I see where MJ is. Looks like she's also in room 2. Okay, we'll figure something out. I'm going to open the rooms, and then you should all be popped into those breakout rooms. So hopefully it looks like everyone should be back now, I believe. Sorry, I didn't get a chance to join the other breakout room. I'm hoping that someone in that breakout room was dealing with that. So if you can move on to the next slide. Thanks, Megan. So breakout rooms, obviously you're just popped in to the breakout rooms. There's a question from Paul. People can be pre-assigned. If you, on the slide, basically you have a couple of options. You can just automatically divide folks up, like we just did. You can manually divide people, say person X should be in breakout room 1, or you can pre-assign, which involves ahead of time uploading a spreadsheet of names to the meeting that you're planning to break out into. That's not something that doing the pre-assigning is not something we usually cover, and I know Megan's going to speak to that a bit later, but maybe if we have time at the end, we can circle back to that. So
yeah,
as
I think that's a good part for the Q&A at the end.
So as you probably experienced, there was with the 3 rooms that made it a little more easy to share your camera, to talk with everyone in that room, as opposed to a room of 50 plus people. And you can obviously make even more rooms and make the number smaller still. The drawback at that point, as we demonstrated beautifully, is that only the host can join breakout rooms. Megan was just assigned to a breakout room as an attendee. So you have to kind of work out how you're going to facilitate that. If you want someone to act in a breakout room as a facilitator, you're probably just going to want to let them know ahead of time and work with them accordingly. As the host, obviously you can join breakout rooms at any point. We didn't do it, but you can, as the host, broadcast a message to everyone in the breakout room, basically saying maybe like, hey, like, hope you're discussing this, or reminding them at some point, or just checking in. It's a one-way system, so they can't respond. Some of you may have noticed when you were in the breakout rooms that there was a ask for help option that just lets the host know that you have a question and they can join that breakout room. Okay. If you'd like to move on to the next slide, Megan.
Yeah, I think before we do that, and it actually might be on here, just one of the biggest places that we'll be using breakout rooms in our workday training courses is when we're doing activities. And that's because it's easier to talk through questions or troubleshoot challenges in smaller groups than it is in larger groups. Another thing just to kind of think through and be aware of is today we have, I think, 52 to 54 attendees. The sessions you'll be leading, with very few exceptions, won't have more than 15. There's a couple courses I think we're maxing out at 25, but those courses we're planning for up to 5 facilitators. So just to help manage it in the back end. So it'll be much easier to have smaller conversations in breakout rooms because those rooms will be more like, you know, rooms of 5 to 8 people, not rooms of, you know, 18 to 20.
Thanks, Megan. So on this the slide that we're looking at now, as the host, you would have that breakout room icon, and at that point, you would be able to break out the participants or attendees in the meeting into different rooms. And the example that we just did, that was 3 rooms, and I selected automatically. So I would otherwise, if it had been manually, I had to click and divide everyone up. And for 50 plus people, that would be a little bit of clicking that I didn't necessarily want to do. Once you've decided on the number of rooms, there's that create rooms option that you can click on, and that basically just then, depending on the setting you've chosen, would divide everyone into those rooms. Okay, if you wouldn't mind moving on to the next slide. Once you have set up the rooms, you have the option to say, okay, I want this room to be open a certain time. You can see here that it's 2 minutes, but you could obviously change that number there. You can either allow the participants to return to the main session or not. And you can choose to move all the participants into the breakout room automatically, or you can, if you uncheck that, then you basically have to, they have to join the meeting. They're not put there automatically. And for the countdown, it can be a good idea to have 15 minutes is not very much time. If you set it a little longer, what you can do is it gives folks a chance to finish what they were saying before they're put back in the main session. And in this icon, in this image here, the open all rooms would be highlighted once you've set up how you want the room to be. As the host, you would just click open all rooms, and then depending on the settings, everyone is basically moved into the room or invited to join the room.
And these will just be things that you'll want to ask the project team as you're looking at your course content. So as you look at your activities, for example, you may say, are we planning to use breakout rooms? And how long is this activity planned for? And is that how long we should set up the breakout rooms to be, or should we add a couple minutes to, you know, for Q&A at the end or for a bio break after? And those are the sorts of questions that we want you to be able to take back to the project team. So that way, you know, they can think through, you know, what that looks like. If breakout rooms are being set up in advance, that's largely something that the project team will be doing and administering on your behalf or for you. But those are the sorts of conversations that you'll need to have. There's a question, can we show how to set up in advance? I don't know if we'll have time to show that, but essentially you create an Excel or a CSV file that's done in your CarmenZoom meeting, not while the meeting is happening. And so that's definitely something you'll need to do well in advance of the meeting, not just a couple minutes beforehand. We do have instructions that we can send out in case people are interested in knowing how to do that for non-project trainings, but for the project, our goal is to do that for you so you all don't have to think as much about that because you're already doing so much for the project. We want to try to take some of that lift off of you.
So thanks for that, Megan. So Chris, just to answer the question, can you extend the time on a breakout session? Once it's set up, you can't extend the time. You could go back, you could basically start again and breakout rooms again and change the time, but you can't extend the duration, basically. Karen
And
is...
so,
sorry, go on,
oh,
Megan.
go ahead.
I was just going to answer Karen's question. Can you reassign someone to another breakout room? Yes, as the host, you can move someone to a different breakout room. If it turns out when you set up the rooms that you'd rather have person X in a different breakout room, you can move them.
And I think, as we think about, can we extend the time for a breakout room? One of the things to think through, especially as you start practicing your content, as you, run your first course, is to come back and revisit, was that an appropriate amount of time? Was that too long? Was it not long enough? How do we adjust accordingly, right? So we're doing what we can is the best laid plans, to identify and make it as easy as we can, but there's going to be a little bit of a headache.
Right, and Megan, to speak to the time, you can choose to uncheck that time option. In that case, it's entirely at the discretion of the host when the breakout room ends. It's possible, if it works for you, depending on how many attendees you have, you could join each breakout room, check in. Has everyone had enough time? Good. Go back to the other room, check in with them, decide that you want to then end the breakout rooms without having a fixed time. That's also a possibility. Again, as Megan says, that's something you're most likely going to work out with your folks and with some practice and experience.
Trevor had a really great question. So, what if you set someone up in advance as Elizabeth, but they join the session as Beth? And the way it's set up in advance is actually using name.numbers and enterprise IDs. And so as part of the instructions for how to join a session, they'll be instructed to log in to their Zoom account before they join. So that way it will more appropriately put people where we need them to. But I think, Trevor, that's the kind of thing that, may be a common thing that we're needing to troubleshoot. And to Emma's point, that's where you can move and adjust people as needed.
And as the host, you can rename people if you know for sure that someone should be something else, or it helps to rename them so you know who they are. You can do that as the host. And this is, we've already talked quite a bit about pre-assigned breakout rooms, but generally that's going to be set up on your behalf ahead of time. And you would basically be given the list of the people that should be in the breakout rooms. So if something does happen, you would be able to basically make sure that they are in the breakout rooms that they were supposed to be.
And I think just as you think through this and look at your content, those are the questions we want you guys to bring back to the project team to say, hey, where are we using breakout rooms, and where do we want to pre-assign it versus where does it not matter and we can just auto-assign them. And some places where we might want to pre-assign, I know this pops up a couple places in supply chain, is where, or in finance, is where as a whole, the process and the tactics of how to do something are similar enough between the campus and the medical center that it makes sense to have everyone together, but maybe it makes more sense to do activities and have targeted conversations in a breakout room so you can really talk about, we talked about the general, let's talk about the specific for the health system, or let's talk about the specifics for OSUP. And so that's an example of a place where we definitely would do that in advance, because then we'd know how many people from the health system do we have versus campus employees. So, things to think about, lots of different use cases and reasons why you might do pre-assigned versus not. There are job aids and things like that exist that will send you all, but that's something, as Emma mentioned, that we would largely be managing centrally on your behalf. And then you would just get the copy and the list, so that way you know who's supposed to be where and how is this supposed to run. But we're not expecting you to generate the CSV files for Zoom.
If you could, I think, yes, okay. So this is something, it's basically a tip for breakout rooms, but it's also a tip in general for screen sharing. Some of you have already screen shared, may have noticed that certain functionality seems to disappear. You're suddenly not sure where to access certain controls. So what happens is that Zoom tries to be helpful and kind of makes that little panel, the sort of sharing panel at the top, makes it compact, and so it hides certain functionality in that 3-dot more menu. So if you click on that, you should see that you have then at that point access to chat and breakout rooms. So if you were planning to going straight into breakout rooms from screen sharing, that's where you find that functionality. Obviously, you can stop sharing at that point to make it easier to manipulate the breakout rooms, but this is something that comes up a lot, is when I'm screen sharing, I'm not sure where chat goes. So Michaela is asking about breakout rooms being recorded. So basically, when you're cloud recording a meeting, breakout rooms aren't recorded. If you do local recording, then the breakout rooms can be recorded, but I believe that whether or not these sessions are going to be recorded may be a decision, again, that you want to work with your folks to decide on.
Yeah. And then if you were to record locally, it would only record the breakout room that you as the host or attendee would be in. It would not record all of them. So just things and nuances to think about. It's not going to record, if you have 3 breakout rooms, it won't record all 3. It would just record whichever one the host is in or has joined. Once again, largely not applicable or meaningful for Workday, but since we're talking about Zoom overall, I want to equip you guys with as much as we can today.
Okay. And with the breakout rooms, if you're invited to join a breakout room, you should be prompted to join, and it should say what breakout room you were assigned to. If for some reason you are invited to a breakout room and don't click join, but instead click later, then you should still see that there's a breakout room icon on your meeting room panel that would allow you then at that point to join the breakout room. No one asked for help today during these breakout rooms, but there is that option. When you're in a breakout room, you can ask the host to join the breakout room if you have a question. And that's something you may want to just confirm with your folks that hey, there is this ask for help option. Just click on it if you want me to ask a question. Favorite troubleshooting, yay. So Zoom is really straightforward, which doesn't mean that it's perfect, but it's very straightforward. Typically, the kind of issues you're going to see are things like people are muted and are not aware they're muted. And they're like, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? We all know what that's like. If for some reason they're not muted, but they're still having problems, it may be that they didn't select the right microphone. anytime you look at the microphone icon in the meeting panel, it says mute. There's a little kind of caret or a little triangle next. It allows you to select or to see what microphone has been selected. So if you have a system one and a headset, if you don't have the right one selected, obviously it won't work. Same with the speaker. Just something to keep in mind. There is a test meeting that's linked when you go to CarmenZoom and sign in. There is a test meeting there that just takes you through the basic. It just invites you to a test Zoom meeting so you can check your settings, check your microphone, check the sound, check your internet. So that's a good idea if you're working with folks who are not familiar with Zoom and they're asking you ahead of time, maybe, I'm not sure if this is going to work, I've never used it, you can direct them to the test meeting. Or you can direct us to the IT help desk and we'll help them with that before they get to the point where they're meeting with you.
I think another just call out for people to know. So one of the things that we've talked about doing is having Zoom practice sessions within your course groups. And so if you think that would be helpful for you, I would encourage you to just mention that to your change team. It may not even need to be something that the change team is joining with you. It may just be something that you do with whoever else in your course group thinks it would be helpful to hop on a meeting, and you guys can swap around who's the host and who's the co-host and practice and play and ask, what can you see versus what can I see?
And the next thing, which may not be an issue for any of you, is that a lot of folks, or some folks at least, got a free Zoom account before they knew about the OSU Zoom account, and they have already that free account and they think they're logging in with their OSU account, but they're actually logging in with their free account. So they're not getting the pro features that everyone who has a name.number should have access to. This may not impact you at all. This is just a general issue that we run into. The fix for that, if you do come across it, is make sure everyone goes to CarmenZoom to log in. Similar but slightly different is students using Buckeye Mail and creating a free account, not realizing that they need their OSU name.number instead of their Buckeye Mail email address. With screen sharing, something I use it a lot is just basically someone can show me what's going on. If they're running into a weird error message or issue, screen sharing, I can see what's going on and can help them. Okay. And Megan has launched the feedback poll. So
yeah,
if you can...
I know we've only got a minute or so left. So before we head out, I wanted you all to be aware that there is a dedicated CarmenZoom section of the OD Resource Center. And so that's where you'll find job aids on pretty much everything we talked about today and more. So if you want to practice after today's session, you can go to the OD Resource Center and find all these things and more about using CarmenZoom. In terms of next steps, I just want to make sure everyone's aligned and on the same page. So one, just make sure you log in and activate your CarmenZoom account. Two, review the materials that you have for your training courses with the OCM team to determine what functionality has been planned and where do you think there are some additional opportunities, and just have that conversation. Third, and the most important, is just practice, 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 whether you use that test meeting functionality or whether you just, set up a meeting and ask a coworker to join and ignore what you're saying because you just need to practice some things. I've actually joined from my phone separately and just with a different login. I've made my husband join more Zoom meetings and I can count so I can see what he sees. And then just a friendly reminder is that as part of your teach backs that you'll be doing to make sure that you're ready for training delivery, you will be using Zoom as part of that, so that way you'll get some practice using Zoom with the content that you'll be using during training delivery. I think David had a question. It'd be helpful to talk more about best practice for virtual meetings versus what we learned about facilitating for in-person training. I think that's definitely a great conversation, and one I'd encourage you to have with your project change team. And two, if you haven't already, there is another required course that MJ created and recorded for us called Facilitating Virtual Training that should be assigned to all of you in Buckeye Learn. I think it's a 24-minute video that MJ could certainly keep me honest on that one. So if you haven't already taken that, that's really going to kind of divide out some of the dynamics between virtual versus in-person. And some of that's going to just come with, you know, practice as much as anything. I know we're past time and a lot of people have back-to-back meetings, so I just want to thank all of you for joining today. If you haven't already, please give us feedback on today's session, and we're looking forward to working with you and supporting you as you get ready to start delivering training and as we go into the fall.